anyways.
So how do you think progress should be made in a world where we are freer than we have ever been? Do you think when are there changes that are desirable to be made, and how would you want to see them implemented, if not through policy or through activism, the way that certain groups currently are promoting?
Well, back, this happened in the 60s, as far as I can tell, that we got this misbegotten idea that the way to conduct yourself as a responsible human being was to hold placards up to protest, to change the viewpoints of other people, and thereby usher in the utopia. It's like, I think that's all appalling. I think it's appalling, and I think it's absolutely absurd that students are taught that that's the way to conduct themselves in the world. First of all, if you're 19 or 20 or 21, you don't bloody well know anything. You haven't done anything. You don't know anything about history. You haven't read anything. You haven't supported yourself for any length of time. You've been entirely dependent on your state and on your family for the brief few years of your existence, and the idea that you have enough wisdom to determine how society should be reconstructed when you're sitting in the absolute lap of luxury, protected by processes that you don't understand, is absolutely, I mean, it's... Okay, so that's let's call that a bad idea,
sure,
shall we? and then the idea that what you should do to change the world is to find people who you disagree with and shake paper on sticks at them and call them names is also, and it's and that you do that before you go out for, here, I'll tell you how serious the activists are. This is something that's just unbelievably comical as far as I'm concerned. So some of you may know that I participated in a debate on free speech, so-called debate at free speech, that the University of Toronto hosted. It turned into a forum and whatever that is, but it's certainly not a debate. But one of the things I did when I was talking to the university administration was to suggest how they might deal with the possibility of protesters. So I said, well, that's easy. I know how you can have absolutely zero protesters. Have it in the morning. They won't get out of bed and attend. So we had it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and there was one MPP, member of parliament, who showed up to hand out some pamphlets, not a single protester. So it's like, if you want a controversial speaker on campus, just have it at 7 in the morning. You won't get a protester within 50 yards of it, because they'll still be sleeping off last night's pot and alcohol-induced hangover. So and the question was, what do I think people should do? And I'll tell you something that's been very interesting to me, and I can see it reflected here. The first thing I've noticed is that when I started putting my videos on YouTube, which was about 3 years ago, I noticed that about 85% of the people that were watching them were men. And I thought, that's pretty weird, because about 80% of my students are women, because men are bailing out of universities like mad, and there won't be one in the social sciences and humanities left in 10 years, but, nobody seems particularly worried about that. You can go look that up online if you want, and look at the enrollment curves and just project them 10 years out into the future. And I've been following that for about 20 years. But one of the things, but online it was 85% men. I thought, wow, that's really weird and strange. And then I made these political videos, and then it's popped up to 91% men. And then I've noticed in the audiences that I've gone to talk to that it's almost all men. Now just look around here, man. It's like, what? It's got to be 90% guys in this audience. And I thought, what the hell's going on? It's weird. And I noticed that at the first free speech debate at the University of Toronto. I made a point of it. I walked into the room and I thought, wow, these are all men. So I had the men stand up and the women stand up. And I used that as an example of the fact that maybe men and women have different interests. It was, just an ad hoc demonstration, but it's really been borne out by the demographic analysis of my viewers. And I have, about 8 million views or something like that now. So it's a pretty big population. I've been talking nonstop about personal responsibility and about the fact that if you want to change the world, you should bloody well get your act together and quit whining and sniveling about how horrible everything is and about how people owe you more rights and more privileges. And for some reason, that seems to be a message that's really resonating among young men. And I think the reason for that, first of all, I think young women have enough to do. And so that's perhaps part of the reason why the message isn't as necessary for them. They're trying to juggle career. They're trying to figure out how to have a family. And they don't really have any question about whether or not that's useful and proper. So they're off doing that and whatever else they're doing. But young men seem to have more of a choice about that. And many of them are essentially bailing out. And it's partly because I think they've been well punished for their virtues. And so I talk to young guys in particular about, you know, adopting some responsibility and trying to straighten out their lives and to bear the load of being properly and to forthrightly move through existence and to become a credit to themselves and their community. And that's what you should do, instead of waving cards at someone telling them to behave more properly because you're morally superior to them. So, and for some reason that message, which is, it's not the sort of message that you would expect to sell, right? It's exactly the opposite of something that you would consider saleable. But my experience has been that the young men in particular are so bloody desperate for that message that they can hardly stand themselves. And it's no wonder, because it's a call to proper being. It's a call to heroic being. And it's a call for people to adopt their individual responsibility and to straighten themselves out and to find out what they could be like if they took on the burdens of existence like respectable, well-educated, articulate, powerful people. And that's to the benefit of everyone.
Yeah.
And so, well, so that's where the responsibility lies. And I'm not interested in, look, I've thought for many, many years, decades really, about having a political career. I mean, I was interested in a political career when I was 13. And so every 5 years or so, I've probably revisited that. But every time I revisited, I came to the same conclusion, which was that the work that I was doing that was focused on a philosophy of individual responsibility and trying to identify how that philosophy had emerged in the West over thousands of years was more important than any possible political action could be. And I still don't regard what I'm doing as political in any sense of the word. I think it's philosophical most accurately, and there's an element of it that's theological. So I think it's individual responsibility, and the meaning of life is to be found in the adoption of individual responsibility. And that's what the university should be teaching people.
So, Dr. Peterson, you mentioned these ideas of responsibility, of virtue, of respect. You've, I think, detailed what you think students